You may have watched a Star Wars in much the same way I did. One evening, the TV already on, the music rises, a black screen with lines of text drifting slowly past. And in that very moment, a familiar feeling appears. You are somewhere safe. Here, everything has been neatly arranged. The good guys wear light colours. The bad guys emerge from the shadows. Who needs to be saved and who must be defeated? Everything is so clear, it requires no thought at all. But if you linger just a little longer, those images begin to grow more frightening than ever. Orders are issued coldly, like entries in a spreadsheet. A weapon can erase an entire planet with a single political decision. And a young man is pushed onto the battlefield, not with the truth, but with a story beautiful enough that he never has time to doubt it. And here are 12 dark secrets that Star Wars 1977 never revealed. Watch until the end, because the final one will make it impossible for you to see this film the same way again. 1. The Empire is a space-age version of fascism. As a child, I saw the Empire in Star Wars the way every child does the bad guys. Dark uniforms, heavy music. They appear, and you know something is wrong. Everything is so obvious it needs no analysis. But the older I got, the more something about them felt chillingly familiar. Rows of troops standing perfectly straight, never turning their heads. Officers speaking in dry, emotionless voices. Decisions made from a distant centre of power where numbers and commands matter more than people. The Empire does not run on rage, it runs on discipline. George Lucas has never hidden the fact that he drew inspiration from Nazi Germany. Grey uniforms, helmets, parades, cold symbols of authority, all the visual language of fascism transplanted into space to make it easier for audiences to accept. And at the centre of it all stands Darth Vader. Vader does not shout. He does not lose control. He speaks slowly, gives short orders, and never explains himself. He does not need to convince anyone that he is right, because in a totalitarian state, power needs no justification. It only needs to be enforced. The most disturbing thing is this: Star Wars does not make the Empire look insane. It makes the Empire look orderly. And that order is placed in contrast with the chaotic, emotional, instinct-driven world of the opposing side. A comparison history knows all too well stability in exchange for freedom. Star Wars does not teach you to love fascism, but it shows you why people can live within it, work for it, and believe they are merely maintaining order. And that is the Empire's true darkness. 2. The Death Star is a weapon of mass destruction. Do you remember the first time you watched Alderaan disappear in Star Wars? There is no long build-up, no crowds running, no screams for help. Just a brief moment, a flash of light, a slight shake of the screen, and then a planet whole and perfect shatters like a toy. At the time, I did not feel horror. I felt awe, and in hindsight, that reaction is the most frightening thing of all. The Death Star is not introduced as a crime. It is introduced as technological progress, a final weapon, a definitive solution. When Imperial officers talk about it, their tone is no different from people presenting efficiency, precision deterrence. No one mentions human beings, only power. Alderaan itself is not built as a place for the audience to grow attached to. We are told it is peaceful, and that is enough. It exists just long enough to be erased, exactly the way modern warfare turns cities into targets and millions of lives into numbers in a report. The scene functions precisely like the way the world once talked about nuclear bombs. Not how many people did we kill, but what can this weapon do? Destruction is packaged in technical language, so emotion never has time to intervene. The most chilling part is this: in Star Wars, no one debates whether the Death Star should exist. They only debate how to use it and when. The power to erase an entire planet is treated as a legitimate political tool as long as it preserves order. Star Wars does not make you cry for Alderaan. It makes you understand that in war, some decisions are made too quickly for pain to even appear. 3. The Jedi are not entirely good. Almost everyone has dreamed of becoming a Jedi in Star Wars. Light-coloured robes, calm voices, blue glowing blades. They enter the frame as if carrying absolute morality, guardians of peace untouched by worldly dust. But the longer you look, the more that image begins to crack. The Jedi are not merely warriors with special powers. They are an order, a closed system that exists alongside society and above it. They are forbidden to love, forbidden to form attachments, forbidden to choose a private life. Emotion is treated as dangerous, not because it is evil, but because it is difficult to control. And then there is a detail that Star Wars mentions so lightly we grow used to it. Jedi train children from a very young age. Children who have not yet had the chance to know who they are taught that their path is already decided, that the power they possess does not belong to them, but to the Jedi Order. That personal choice is something to be sacrificed for balance. From another perspective, the Jedi resemble an elite cult. They believe only those sensitive to the Force are qualified to decide the fate of the galaxy. Everyone else, ordinary people, are merely those who must be protected or guided. What is frightening is that the Jedi do not rule through violence. They rule through morality. They believe they are right to the point of never needing to be questioned. And history has shown again and again the most dangerous systems are not the ones that know they are evil, but the ones that are convinced they are good. Star Wars does not turn the Jedi into villains, but it shows you a very familiar model, a group of people who in the name of balance and order grant themselves the right to decide the fate of others. 4. The Force is a tool of control, not magic. There is a line in Star Wars that almost everyone remembers, not because it is profound, but because it is repeated so often it becomes a greeting. May the Force be with you. Back then, it sounded beautiful, gentle, like a wish for peace before stepping into a vast world. But if you stop and listen more carefully, that line is not a blessing, it is a division. The Force in Star Wars does not belong to everyone. It is selective. Some people are born Force sensitive, others are not. And from that moment on, their paths split in two directions, one toward power, the other toward standing outside of history. Those who have the Force are given weapons trained, listened to. Those who do not become background civilians, soldiers, victims. They exist in the story, but they are never the ones who truly decide. Star Wars does not call this a class system. It calls it destiny. The Jedi do not say they are stronger than others. They say the Force chose them. And that sentence alone is enough to end all debate. This is a modern version of an old class ideology, no noble bloodlines, no thrones, only Force sensitivity. But the result is the same, a small group born to lead, and the rest born to believe. And when power is wrapped in magic, the question of who deserves to rule suddenly becomes unnecessary. 5. Luke Skywalker is a product of war propaganda. Do you remember how Luke Skywalker begins in Star Wars not as a hero, not as a warrior, just a young man bored with his life staring up at a desert sky and dreaming of somewhere else? Luke does not crave battle, he craves meaning, and that emptiness is exactly what makes him easy to guide. Luke does not discover the war on his own. The war comes to him through carefully told stories. His father was a hero. The enemy is absolute evil, and the galaxy needs young people brave enough to stand up. No one lies to Luke, they simply tell him selectively. From the moment Obi-Wan hands him the lightsaber, Luke is given a new identity. No longer an anonymous farmer. He becomes the chosen one, the hope. And when a young man believes he has a historical role to play, sending him to the battlefield becomes far easier. Good and evil are drawn with lines so sharp that doubt has no room to exist. The Empire is evil incarnate. The rebels are righteousness itself. And in that world, violence is no longer a choice. It becomes a moral duty. Luke is idealized at lightning speed, from a dreamy boy to a combat pilot. from someone searching for himself to a symbol. This is the familiar arc of war propaganda turning personal longing into a collective instrument, turning youth into a resource. Star Wars never says Luke is being exploited, but it shows something very real. War does not need people who love killing. It needs young people who believe they are doing the right thing. And when a generation is taught that a hero is someone willing to go to war, the question, is there another way, is never asked. 6. The Rebel Alliance is not a pure movement. There is something Star Wars always does very skillfully. It never lets you see the war from the other side. In Star Wars, the Rebel Alliance is heroic from the very beginning, and once you are labelled a hero, every action is given a pleasant name. The rebels appear as the underdogs pushed into a corner, and once the story places you in that emotional position, you no longer call their actions violence, you call it resistance. But strip away the symbols, and the way the Rebel Alliance fights looks very familiar in modern history. Bombing bases, sabotaging infrastructure, assassinating commanders, striking suddenly, and disappearing. That is guerrilla warfare. And in the eyes of any state, those actions always carry another name: armed terrorism. Star Wars never shows you what the other side calls them. It also never shows you the consequences behind each small victory. The bases that explode have no civilians. The officers who are shot have no families. Death exists only for an instant, quick enough to avoid guilt. This is a familiar storytelling mechanism of war. Dehumanize the enemy, so the audience never has to face a moral question. When the opponent is reduced to uniforms and helmets, killing becomes a technical act, not a choice. Star Wars does not say the rebels are wrong, but it also gives you no tools to doubt them. It tells a war in which only one perspective is allowed to exist, and that is exactly how effective propaganda works. Because in war, the most dangerous thing is not violence, but the belief that one's own side is incapable of doing wrong. 7. Darth Vader is a victim of the system. We are used to calling Darth Vader a symbol of evil, a black-clad figure, an emotionless voice death following wherever he appears. But Star Wars also quietly reveals a more uncomfortable truth. Vader was not born that way. He was made. Anakin grew up in war, in fear, in a world that constantly told him that emotion was dangerous. The Jedi Order did not teach him how to face the fear of loss, they taught him how to suppress it. And when a person is stripped of the ability to express emotion, what remains is not serenity. What remains is pressure. When Anakin begins to fall, the system does not save him. It labels him a failure. When he is afraid, the system does not embrace him. It warns him. And when he makes a mistake, the system abandons him entirely. Star Wars calls this a fall, but look more closely, and it is a human being pushed out of every possible exit. Vader becomes the perfect warrior of a totalitarian order. No emotion, no hesitation, no questions. He carries out commands with the precision the system desires. And then, when everything collapses, that same system points at him and says, "This is the monster." Star Wars gives you a villain to hate, but it also shows a very real tragedy. Society can create monsters and then use those monsters to prove that it was right all along. 8. Droids are normalized slaves. Star Wars never calls droids slaves. It does not need to. It only needs to make you used to the idea. C-3PO knows fear. He worries. He panics at the thought of being taken apart. R2-D2 feels pain, knows loyalty, chooses sacrifice. They have memories, personalities, emotions, but no rights. They are bought and sold, owned, memory wiped, and ordered around like objects. All of it is told with humour, so you smile instead of feeling disturbed. This is the most effective way dehumanization works. Make it cute. Star Wars builds a world where slavery exists legally, as long as the slaves are not made of flesh and blood. Droids can be treated cruelly without moral debate because the story has taught us that they are not real. And yet, the longer we watch, the more they seem, far more human than many other characters. The frightening thing is that no one in this galaxy ever questions droid rights. No one thinks wiping their memories is cruel. That is simply the normalized order. Star Wars shows something painfully familiar. Humans always find a way to place someone lower, so they do not have to confront their own cruelty. 9. This galaxy has no civilians. There is something very strange when you look back at Star Wars. You can hardly remember a single civilian face. This galaxy is full of soldiers, generals, princesses, leaders, knights. But where are the people who live in the middle of the war? Planets appear as scenery. Cities are backdrops. Crowds show up for a few seconds, then vanish with the next explosion. War is told from cockpits, from command rooms, from places where orders are given, not from places where consequences are suffered. Alderaan is destroyed, but we do not know a single family there. Bases are blown up, but we never see anyone lose a home. Space battles end with cheers, not with the silence after funerals. Star Wars tells war as a chain of heroic moments, not as a process that grinds down everyday life. This is how war is often told by those who carry weapons. When civilians disappear from the frame, violence becomes cleaner. There is no longer the question who pays the price, only the question who wins. Star Wars does not deny pain, it glides past it. And when a story focuses only on decision makers, war becomes normalized as a strategic game. A galaxy without civilians is a galaxy where war never has to apologize. 10. Star Wars is a war film, not a fairy tale. Star Wars is remembered as a modern fairy tale. But strip away the adventurous surface, and what remains is a very familiar war film, propaganda radicalization, absolute divisions, and an endless cycle of violence. George Lucas has openly admitted that he was deeply influenced by the Vietnam War. And that influence is everywhere a powerful empire facing guerrilla forces. Young people told they are the last hope, and the belief that moral victory can justify any means. The film teaches you how to see the enemy uniformed faceless, speaking differently and dying quickly. It also teaches you how to see your own side under-resourced brave and acting for a righteous cause. This is the classic structure of propaganda, no lies required, only selective storytelling. Star Wars does not merely depict war. It trains emotions for war, who deserves sympathy, who deserves death, and when applause is appropriate. When the story ends in fireworks and celebration, the audience leaves the theatre feeling relieved, a feeling utterly alien to real war. 11. Good and evil in Star Wars are a dangerous simplification. Star Wars asks you to believe in two clear colours, the light side and the dark side. Once you choose a side, everything becomes simple. We are right, they are wrong. And when the world is divided that way, violence becomes a duty. Real-world war does not operate in two colours. It is full of grey zones, fear interests, misunderstandings, and terrible choices made in terrible circumstances. But Star Wars cuts away those grey areas so the story can move faster. The consequence is that viewers learn to think if the goal is right, the means no longer matter. This is the most effective mechanism of propaganda: reduce moral complexity to accelerate action. When the enemy is labelled darkness, questioning becomes out of place. And when doubt is treated as weakness, people stop asking questions. Star Wars does not teach you to kill. It conditions your emotions so killing no longer feels heavy. A world where good and evil are too clear is a world where brutal decisions are made very quickly. 12. Peace in Star Wars is only a pause between wars. The ending of Star Wars brings a sense of victory. The Empire falls, music swells, people embrace. But look closely, and it is not peace, it is a pause. There is no reconciliation, no dialogue, no process of healing, only one power structure collapsing and another preparing to take its place. Violence does not disappear, it changes form. Human history is familiar with this pattern. One war ends to prepare for the next. Today's enemy becomes tomorrow's lesson. Today's hero becomes a symbol for the next generation to follow and to march into battle. Star Wars tells an uncomfortable truth. War is very good at reproducing itself. It leaves behind memories, symbols, and stories beautiful enough to keep convincing people that the cycle is necessary. And so, peace in Star Wars is not a destination. It is the silence required for violence to return with a new flag, a new enemy, and the same old logic. Perhaps the most telling thing about Star Wars is not what it says, but what it makes us accustomed to. Accustomed to a world divided neatly into two sides. Accustomed to power always having a moral justification. Accustomed to lives disappearing without anyone stopping to ask why. Accustomed to war being told as a coming-of-age journey, as destiny, as something inevitable. Star Wars does not teach you to hate anyone. It only teaches you to choose a side quickly. And once a side is chosen, many difficult questions simply vanish. That is not the film's flaw. It is its power. Because Star Wars was born from a real-world one where war propaganda and power already existed. It did not invent these things. It retold them in a way that is easier to watch, easier to believe, and easier to accept. If Star Wars was ever part of your childhood, leave a comment about the detail that left the strongest impression on you. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you won't miss future videos.